You are sitting somewhere right now doing nothing in particular. Maybe you picked up your phone. Maybe you flicked through something without really seeing it. Maybe you just stared at the wall for a second before snapping yourself back. You called that boredom. You probably felt a little guilty about it. But what if that restless, hollow, crawling feeling is not a flaw in your design? What if it is the most sophisticated survival technology your ancestors ever evolved? The real answer is far stranger than you think. Boredom feels modern. It feels like a disease of comfort, something that only exists because you have too much free time and too many screens. But boredom has been inside you since long before there were screens, long before there were cities, long before there was language. It was there in the body of an early human sitting at the edge of a savanna, watching the grass move, waiting for something to happen, and it was keeping that human alive. Here is what scientists have recently figured out. Boredom is not the absence of stimulation, it is a signal. It is your nervous system sending a very specific message. What you are doing right now is not enough. Go find something better. The feeling is uncomfortable by design. It is supposed to push you. Psychologist John Eastwood at York University spent years studying boredom and arrived at a definition that changes everything. Boredom, he found, is the desire to engage in something satisfying, but the inability to do it. That gap between desire and action is not emptiness. It is pressure. Productive, evolutionary pressure. Think about what that means for your ancestors. A brain that was content to sit still was a brain that starved. A brain that got restless, that felt the itch to do something, to go somewhere, to try something new. That was a brain that found food, discovered tools, mapped territory, and survived the winter. Boredom was not a bug. It was the engine. Neuroscientist Mary Helen Imordino-Yang at the University of Southern California found something remarkable when she scanned the brains of people who were doing nothing. The brain does not go quiet when you are bored. An entirely separate network lights up. A vast, energy-hungry system called the default mode network. And this network is not resting. It is working. It is pulling memories forward, running simulations, imagining futures that do not exist yet, rehearsing social situations, processing meaning. Your brain in boredom is not offline. It is in a different mode entirely. The mode that makes you human. This is where things get strange. Because the default mode network is not just active during boredom, it is the birthplace of your most distinctly human abilities. Empathy lives there. Creative insight lives there. The ability to model other people's minds, to understand what someone else is feeling, to imagine yourself in a situation you have never been in, that lives there. When you let your mind wander, you are not wasting time. You are running the most complex software that biology has ever produced. Psychologists Sandy Mann and Rebecca Cadman at the University of Central Lancashire ran an experiment. They asked one group of participants to copy numbers out of a phone book, one of the most boring tasks imaginable, and then immediately gave both groups a creative problem to solve. The bored group was significantly more creative than the control group. Significantly. Not slightly. Not marginally. The boredom had lit something up inside them. Why? Because boredom forces the mind to generate its own stimulation. When there is nothing interesting outside, your brain turns inward. It starts connecting things that were not connected before. It drifts across memories and future plans and half-formed ideas, and sometimes, in that drift, two things collide that have never touched before. And that collision is called a new idea. Every piece of art, every scientific breakthrough, every invention that changed the trajectory of civilization began as someone sitting with nothing to do. Darwin walking his thinking path, Newton watching the orchard, Einstein riding an imaginary beam of light. They were not doing nothing. They were bored. And their brains were doing exactly what your brain is designed to do in that state. But here is the counterintuitive twist. You have made boredom nearly impossible to experience. Every cue, every wait, every gap between one thing and the next is now filled. You fill it with a scroll, with a video, with noise. You have become so good at escaping the discomfort of boredom that you have cut yourself off from everything it was built to give you. And the consequences are showing up in the data. Psychologists Jonathan Smallwood and Jonathan Schooler have published research showing that mind wandering, the state boredom drops you into, is directly linked to creative problem solving, future planning, and the processing of complex social and emotional information. When you suppress mind wandering, those capacities shrink. When you fill every moment with external input, you are not stimulating your brain. You are preventing it from doing its deepest work. There is also a darker side to this. When boredom is blocked rather than experienced, it does not disappear. It mutates. Research in clinical psychology has linked chronic boredom avoidance to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and impulsive decision-making. A brain that never gets to sit in its own discomfort becomes a brain that cannot regulate itself, that cannot tolerate uncertainty, that reaches for the fastest available reward, not because it wants to, but because it was never given the chance to learn patience. Your ancestors had no choice. They sat in the boredom. They felt it. And on the other side of it, they found the plan, the tool, the route, the idea that kept them going another day. The discomfort was not the problem. The discomfort was the solution. There is a concept in psychology called productive disengagement. It sounds like a contradiction, but it captures something real. The moments when you are not actively doing anything are not lost moments. They are moments when your brain is doing something you cannot consciously direct. Something that requires you to get out of your own way. Something that only happens in the gaps. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who spent decades studying peak human experience, found that many of his research subjects reported their most meaningful and creative moments did not come during focused work. They came in the transitions, in the showers, in the walks, in the stretches of nothing where the mind was left alone to do what it does. Boredom is the transition. It is the gap your brain needs to integrate everything it has absorbed, to make sense of everything that has happened, to generate something new from the raw material of your experience. It is not a pause in your life. It is a necessary part of your life's function, and yet the feeling is genuinely unpleasant. That is not an accident. The discomfort is the signal. If boredom felt good, your ancestors would have sat still forever and died. The ache of it, the restless, crawling, this is not enough feeling, that is evolution tugging at your sleeve. That is a 200,000-year-old voice saying, move, think, try something, find something better. The question is whether you listen to it or silence it. Because here is what happens when you sit with it. When you let the boredom arrive and stay instead of immediately running from it, your mind drifts. And in that drift, something begins to clarify. A problem you could not solve starts to look different. A feeling you could not name finds its word. A decision you could not make starts to settle into place. Not because you forced it, because you got out of the way. You were built for this. Your brain was designed for exactly this kind of slow, unstructured, purposeless time. Every generation before yours had it by default. They had no choice but to sit with the fire dying down, with the field empty, with the evening long and quiet and open. And in that openness, the human mind did what it does. It wandered forward. It imagined. It invented. You have inherited that brain. You are carrying the same neural architecture, the same default mode network, the same ancient restlessness. The only difference is that now you have to choose to let it run. So the next time you feel that hollow, restless, something is missing feeling, before you reach for the phone, sit with it for just a moment. Let the discomfort be there. Let your mind drift, because that feeling, the one you have been trained to call boredom, the one you have been reaching past your whole life, is not the enemy of your potential. It is the oldest tool you have.